Hi, I'm Owen from Rask Australia. Thanks for tuning in to the Rask Network.
Before we get into today's show, there are a few things we have to go over.
Firstly, what you're about to hear and see is limited to general information only. It's not personal financial advice like you'd get from a financial planner. Also, it's important to remember that past performance is not indicative of future performance. That means that anything that's happened in the past, or we say today, is not necessarily going to reflect what happens in the future. Lastly, please consider that any of the guests or myself are featuring on this program may have a financial interest in some of the products or shares mentioned. That's enough from me. I hope you enjoyed today's program.
Chris Bates, welcome back to the Australian Finance Podcast.
Okay, how you doing?
I'm doing really well. It's lovely to have you in our Sydney studio today.
I know, it's always nicer in person. I do enjoy it. We can get deep into a topic today. So what are we going to chat about?
We're talking about the green and red flags to look out for as a consumer when it comes to people in the property industry, which I think is pretty important to know about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the property world's got a lot of different players in it. It's got end of the day, you want something at the end of it, right? So you sort of got to play the system, play the game, but then you also want to know what are the sort of warning signs and who do I avoid and, who do I gravitate towards? And what are some of the mistakes? And I think learning from people's mistakes is one of the best ways to actually play the game, I guess.
Yeah, and it does feel like a bit of a game when you're going to auctions and you're dealing with agents and you're trying to negotiate prices.
Yeah, absolutely. People get very frustrated at the game, like it's underquoting, for example, with real estate agents, or just the difficulty, not being enough properties on the market, and unfortunately, you just got to go through the pain to get the result, because not playing the game potentially isn't an option, right? And whether it means you haven't got security with home, or whether you miss that as an asset class from a growth point of view. So hate the players, but don't hate the game a little bit. You just got to play the game. I think that's how the saying goes or something. But play it and just try to play it as smart as you can and try to make as fewer mistakes. And rather than changing the system or getting too frustrated with the system, because system's probably not going to change, but how you play it, you can.
Yeah, and you've got a bit of insight here as a mortgage broker. You've been in this industry for quite a long time now. Yeah,
I mean, I've been a financial advisor since 2007. With property market since 2012. So the first 5 years was a lot of older clients and pre-retiree and helping people, money not run out in retirement. But since 2012, it was as a financial advisor that was working with mortgage brokers, but then became a mortgage broker back in 2013. And since then, I've always been working with buyers agents as well. So, we refer to over 40 around the country. So we've seen a lot of different markets, a lot of different people. And, also, doing things myself, you get that on the ground experience as well. And I'm pretty useless at that. So
bit of the politics as well behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you have to deal with the real estate agents. If you want to get your buyer's agents, there's a whole world there. There
was even a TV show about it in Sydney, wasn't there?
Lux Listings. Yeah, that's showing a certain side of buyer's agency. Simon and the ultra high net worth sort of element. But then you got buyer's agents at all elements. And then you got ones that, really are doing a great job. And you got ones that potentially, because it's completely unregulated, they might be selling off the plan, or might be selling new townhouses, or they might be selling lots of cheap investment properties around the country. And so it's a really murky world. And so you've got to kind of navigate it because it is unregulated, and it's big financial decisions, when you're talking hundreds of thousands or millions, and then a debt attached to it that you've got to pay. If you get it right or wrong, those decisions compound in the right or wrong direction. And I think that's why it's so important to get educated. And so, that's why it's so valuable listening and educating yourself before you make these big moves, because property is very unforgiving. It's sort of, once you've made that decision, you don't really consider if it was a good decision till many years down the line. And a lot of people don't really. They just buy it and they just, she'll be right, mate. I'll just whatever it is. But, really you should be back testing that decision and saying, what could I have done 5 years ago instead of that? How would that have performed? And what was the opportunity cost? And so when people make their property decisions, they make it and then they consider it 5-10 years down the line whether it was a good decision. Shares are a bit different. People make their is it a good or bad decision very quickly because you've got that real market timing reporting. And so, if you with property, you're in huge transaction costs And then if it goes well, it goes well. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So all your research has to happen before you enter to make that decision as best you can.
There feels like a bit of a perception in Australia, like any property is good property. It's just good to get in the market.
Yeah, CoreLogic released a report last week. So it's October now. Every quarter they do a pain and gain report. If you believe that every property goes up and every property goes up the same rate, read that report and you'll see how many people lose on property. What percentage of people resell at a loss? It's astounding, 30, 40% of unit holders, apartment holders at a loss, even more prolific in cities that have had downturns like Perth or Darwin. And so, and you can see that how long you hold a property and houses and apartments, they all grow at different rates. And that report really opens your eyes and go, actually, a lot of people are losing money on property, which people don't talk about at barbecues.
All right, Chris. Now, our listeners don't want to make these big property mistakes. So maybe if we start with real estate agents, what are some of the maybe a green flag and a red flag we should be thinking about? Yeah,
so there's probably, the first thing is to do is to know that real estate isn't your friend, really. They're there to act for the vendor's best interest. And real estate agents are amazing at sort of building rapport and making you feel like you're a friend, but what they're trying to do is get information out of you, right? And so sometimes people will try to withhold that information because they think, look, the real estate agent is my friend, so I'm not going to tell them anything. But what the agent then can't help you because they don't know really what your budget is or what you really want. And they actually see you as a buyer that isn't ready to go. And so when they've got a property that could sell fast, they won't think of you because they just don't know how serious you are. So a real estate asking you lots of questions and trying to get your situation is true. But you also, that's a good sign, rather than one just trying to get you into a property, just buy anything. I would say you try to work with an agent because if an agent knows more and more about your situation, they're more likely to put you on their hit list. And if that property comes up that suits what you're looking for and you tell them that you're pre-approved and you're ready to go and you're ready to make, then that's the agents I'd stay close to. So you want to befriend the agent. Don't go, I'm not going to tell them anything because they're just going to try to, sell me something. A real red flag, I think, which can turn into a positive, is if they're sort of like in the process trying to make you make an offer, because when they're trying to make you make an offer, it could be two things. One, they've already got really strong competition and they're going to try to create an auction, Dutch auction, where they get lots of people making offers at the same time, not an actual auction. It's done via text messages or emails or phone calls. Or they're trying to get you to make an offer because they've got no other bidders and no other. And so that's a real red flag where you say, actually, I don't think there's anyone interested in this property. I need to cool my jets.
Yeah.
The reason they'll try to get you to make an offer is they'll say someone else is getting ready to make an offer, or someone tomorrow is just doing a building and pest tomorrow. We think they're going to make an offer. So they use that terminology where they haven't actually got an offer. Or sometimes they say they've got an offer, but then you ask if it's written down or is it an actual offer? Have you presented that to the vendor? And if they say no, well, then they're fishing on you just to get an offer. And so I would say that's a red flag that's actually, hey, hang on a sec. This property is not as hot. I need to cool my jets. I'm going to try to use that as a negotiation, advantage rather than, oh my God, someone else is going to make an offer. I really need to make an offer.
Yeah, that sense of urgency can cause us to do things we might not have wanted to do before.
Yeah, and agents only do that if at one of those two times. They only try to get you to make an offer if they haven't got any other offers and they're just trying to get someone to buy it. So they're trying to create scarcity, or they have actually got offers. So it's hard to read, and so I think it's asking a lot more questions around the offers they've got, when did they get them, who are they from, and just try to do the BS test on it, right? And if they can give you some real clear information, they present it to the vendor, it's going to sell, then you take it more serious and you go, actually, if I don't make an offer, I'm going to lose it. Do I want to lose it? And then you go down a negotiation. But if it's very vague, it's a good sign that, the advantage is to you, and then you don't have to put that urgency there. You just let time do its thing. And the agent will always come up with like you as a buyer, you can always change your plan. So the agent could always say, oh, that offer fell through, so it's still on the market. Just because they're saying an offer's on the table, it doesn't mean that it's going to go ahead.
Yeah, there's lots of reasons why it might not go ahead too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's often that's the game. So agents play that strategy when they think you're ready to go, and they try to motivate you with a potential offer out there.
Okay. Where should we go next? Buyers agents?
Yeah, so buyers agents are a really interesting world. I did mention before that it is unregulated, right? And there's a few different buyers agency associations. I'd say that the right buyers agent a real green flag is similar to that real estate agent asking you lots of questions, is someone who's really talking you through your life and where are you going to live long term and how are you going to do that and how do you envisage this property working for you? It's not all of a sudden trying to push you to their strategy, what they're used to buying. And I think what a good buyer's agent sort of is almost trying to do that life planning sort of trusted advisor chat is really questioning you up front, truly getting asking you big questions like, would you consider this suburb or would you consider that suburb? What matters more to you is 4 bedrooms or a second bathroom or a carport? Tries to get that brief really tight because the buyer's agents we see that don't do that, they just try to get you signed up, get you onto a fee. And then once you've paid something, you've got skin in the game, and then they'll just start throwing you properties. And so, the real green flags, the buyer's agent that, slows down, because those buyer's agents have been doing it for 5-10 years, know that they don't want to take you on as a client unless they know that what you want is achievable. And so they get really clear at that front. They don't waste signing you up and then disappoint you.
Yep.
A red flag would be the opposite to that, to be honest. When a buyer's agent really starts to all of a sudden say, oh no, don't do what you're doing here. Why don't you go down this investment strategy? And this is what my other clients are doing. They're almost selling you a product or a solution, but they're not listening to you and what you want. And there's lots of buyer's agents who play in that space because they try to go down a solution that's easy for them to facilitate. Buying investment property is really easy. Buying homes and, for people is really hard in comparison.
Yeah. So finding someone who's actually going to take time upfront to figure out what you want and if it's realistic too, rather than just saying, pay money and we'll sort it out later. Yeah.
And if you do go to anyone who is on the investment side, because you've got your home sorted, the biggest red flag is if any buyer's agent buys a new property. And it can be that black and white. There's in my view, there's not even like good new property. There's if you're buying new property, you as a buyer's agent, you're doing it for one or two reasons. One, because you get big kickbacks that way.
Are they still allowed that?
Yeah, absolutely. They can get huge kickbacks from developers. It's all unregulated. So, depending on the city, depending on the site, like how difficult the property is to sell, to be honest. The harder the property is to sell for the developer, the more commission they give. So like in Brisbane apartments were really hard to sell. They're giving huge commissions to people introducing properties, like 10, 15% of the purchase price. So 40, 60 grand, et cetera. So any buyer's agent that says, I buy some new for depreciation benefits or I buy new, that to me is a huge red flag. And personally, I would go to a buyer's agent that just doesn't do that, only buys established and is very, because it's too easy for them to try to play both sides.
Yeah.
I'll get a big kickback from a developer. And even if they say I give the money back from the developer and I charge you a fee, it's still too murky and they're not buying great assets.
Is there a risk there that buyer's agents might start providing advice in areas they're not qualified to provide advice in?
Yeah, there is that. So they'll give you an amazing property forecast, research, and research and property investment. They're two words that go interlinked. And the problem with that is they're usually trying to sell something. It's a beautiful document and it's selling this solution that's getting them big kickbacks. And in that document, there's beautiful forecasting, all these capital growth returns and the depreciation benefits. And so that would be a red flag in itself. If someone's trying to give you this depreciation schedule and these forecasted capital growth returns of 7-8% and this is how much money it's going to make you, run.
Sounds like tax advice to me.
Yeah, exactly. And they'll be obviously disclaimer on there, past returns aren't a guide's future. But yeah, I've been to lots of property days and home buyer cinemas and these things just float around. Everyone's just promising these ridiculous returns. And so, yeah, be very careful in that space.
What about with conveyancers or lawyers that are helping you with the contract side of the process?
Yeah, so there's lots of big expensive process, buying a property, you've got stamp duty, you've got the deposit. And so people try to save money on the fringes, but one of the things we see them try to save money on is not doing a building and pest, which prime example while I'm here is story last year. Clive bought a multi-million-dollar property down near Thurrool. Last year they had a real estate agent was offering them a $50 building and pest. They said no to that, which most agents do. Most people take that, to be honest.
$50 sounds pretty cheap for building and pest.
They aggregate it across all the buyers and whoever then wins it pays a few $100 more.
Yeah.
And so it's seen as a cheaper option when you're trying to buy a property because it's only $50 per property rather than $600. Our client did their own through a different person for $600. the report that they got found all 3 bathrooms, waterproofing was damaged, and there was all these issues, and the real estate agents didn't have that. It was $150,000 of cost. They ended up negotiating $100,000 off the purchase price because they spent $600 and they would not have found it. And we've seen that multiple times. So people try to save money on building and pests by using the real estate agents, which is too conflicted, or they try to do it on conveyancing. So they go for a $990 or a $1490, online conveyancing service. And because they're trying to do it at a low cost, the people that are doing those checks on the contract, the people who are facilitating the settlement, may not have the experience, right? Or may not have the time to actually go through things in detail. And, you don't need to miss much, whether it's something with the local planning or with the easements or even the contract and releasing a deposit. And so I would say, for an extra little bit more I would go for someone who's dealing with, got reputation risk, they've got a small business, and they're charging a little bit more, and then they can actually spend a bit more time going through that contract, because they might only happen 0.1% of the time. But if something goes wrong there with the contract, it could be a big deal. And, it's spending the time to educate you on title insurance and all these other things, the checks that they may not be doing because they're trying to do things at a low cost. And so the big red flag is those providers. And what we find is the experience you have once you've purchased is you're chasing up the conveyancer, and then they haven't got a phone number, and then you have to call some other number. And you waste multiple hours between when you purchase and when you settle. If you add those hours onto the top of the cost, you'd probably be the same cost as that one person who's all over it. And you don't have to contact them at all because you know that they've got it covered.
Yeah. What's the sign of a good conveyancer if we're looking for one?
I would say that someone who just doesn't facilitate what you want. So, one that we work with, she's always like pushing for like anything she can get in the buyer's favor, she pushes for. She doesn't think that's reasonable. And even if it's things where you as a buyer, because you're emotional, you just want to get the property, you might think, oh, that doesn't matter too much for me. She'll say, no, let's ask for it. They can always say no. So a good conveyancer will push and ask for a lot, and then potentially let some of those things go as part of the negotiation, but won't just look for the small win, the big wins, like the price and the settlement terms. They'll look at little things in the contract, like maybe it's access to the property prior to settlement, so you can take some photos or do open houses. Now, you as a buyer might say, I don't really need that, I just want it. But if you can get that as part of the negotiation, that's a good value add. And so, or it might be, the vendor wants to get access to the deposit so they can buy another property, whereas they'll say, no, we won't give them that. So they'll get it removed out of the contract and only give it back if it's a negotiation. So it becomes a negotiation tool. So, someone who's got a lot of experience knows how to ask what's okay to ask for to be removed, and what's okay to be asked to be added, and what can we vary. And so the good ones know how to play that game.
Yeah. Just personally, the conveyancer I used, who was also a solicitor, during the process, she was just super proactive with communication.
Yeah.
She did all the phone calls between all the parties, so I didn't have to worry about that. She sent me a checklist of things I needed to do. And even in the pre-inspection, maybe 2 or 3 days before settlement, she sort of reminded me to go and have a look. And there was a few things that were missing. And so she sorted out all of that with the sellers. So it was just really made the process a lot easier. Yeah.
And that's one of those ones you are paying a little bit more when things don't go to plan. It could be on settlement day, they've left heaps of stuff there. And you say, well, you either give us $500 to get it removed, or we're going to delay settlement a day, So they can fight those little wins for you where, and even just coming up to settlement, it's so stressful, that period. You've got to think about moving, you got to think about new furniture, you got to think about all the changes. And
there's often a lot of dates you need to line up. So if things are pushed back and forward a day, it could cost you a lot. Yeah, exactly. And then, we've had clients nearly miss settlements, and we've been, chasing solicitors that, just won't answer calls, and particularly in those on-the-line cheaper ones that, it's a nightmare. So go with a very experienced, maybe a little bit more, but that time is money well spent. Yeah, given how big this purchase is for most people. Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Okay, well, what about your home ground, mortgage brokers? So I think it's the first thing you want to do is know that most brokers are, pretty much all brokers are coming from the same, toolkit, right? So we've all got access to the same banks, we've all got access to the same products. And so
if you go to a broker and they start pushing you on the amazing rate they can get or this new product or something like that, that's a red flag, because what they're trying to win you on is rate and product. They're not trying to win you on mortgage strategy and advice. And so
like before they even know anything about you, they're just going straight to the rate.
Yeah, or the product. I think we should get you pre-approved at CBA, and they're trying to win you on a product without really understanding your situation. And I think that's definitely what the problem with that is, that if there is while they sound like they know their products, what they're trying to do is just sell the product that they know or the rate to win you. They're not really the best brokers, I would say. Don't talk about products. Really focus on the other side of your situation. What's your plan now? What's your plan in the future? How's this property going to work? What's your future lending needs going to look like? Can I match the right product to that now? And then they go and figure out who's going to give them that product. So it sounds like the right thing at first. Oh, that person really knows their product. They found the product straight away. They know the best rate. But actually, no, they don't. They're just selling the product they know. And they're going to try to win you on a headline rate. The other big red flag is headline rates, to be honest. It's, a lot of products have got these introductory rates where they're great for the first 12 months or 2 years, and then they jump to a higher rate. Or they're no fees and they don't offer an offset account or etc. So just be very wary on sometimes what looks to be a great rate today, and it might not be in the future.
Because if they don't take the time to really understand what you want, they might not realize you want an offset account. You might end up with something that's not suitable. Yeah,
and they just haven't explored other options. Like, maybe it's paying a little bit of lender's mortgage. Maybe it's a guarantor loan. Maybe it's having a small loan and then, but a bank that you can do a renovation at might be easy to get cash out. Or there's lots of things where the product you want today to suit your future plans. And if they don't even know what your future plans are, how can they match that product? So that would be the big red flag. The opposite, obviously, that is the broker that, really starts to think through your decision, doesn't just validate what you want to do as well. Like, I think they need to stop you sometimes to say, actually, this isn't a good decision. We do that all the time. Client come in thinking they wanted to do X and we've completely flipped that. We've changed their thinking. They may not even, instead of trying to buy today, maybe they're buying in 6 or 12 months' time, and they need to save a bit more, but that's okay. That's a much better decision. Maybe it takes a little bit longer to enter, but so I think a broker that does that
pushes back a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. We're trying to get the broking industry to take that step. Because coming from financial advice, we see ourselves as more trusted advisors, and we think the broker's role needs to, and because the brokers are getting attacked a little bit by digital, like every other industry, AI, the product side is attacking brokers that are offering products. So the way for the broking industry to evolve to beat that fight is to become more advice driven. And to offer something that, AI can't do. And so we just think if brokers are the facilitator or is the enabler to a lot of debt in the world, they should also be, giving advice or guidance to stop them making poor decisions. So they might not actually doing it themselves, but at least highlighting and say, actually, you need to speak to a financial planner. Actually, what? I think you need to speak to someone who knows what talking about property. They're not just following what their friend did. So stopping them if they think they're making a poor decision and, encouraging them to speak to other experts.
That's a really important value add because there's so many people in our lives that are just going to say, yes, any property's great. You should just get into the market. But having one person to actually maybe just say, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? A lot of us don't have someone for that.
Yeah, and it's hard. I think the broking should just make that step. Because what they want to do is they want to be the facilitator to enable the transaction to go through. So they don't really want to put hurdles in that may slow something down or send it in a different path because they actually just want to get them as a customer. And the easiest way to do that is just to say, be a yes person and, yep, you want that? Yep, I can do that. I can do that. They don't say, no, have you thought about X, Y, Z? Because that slows things down. But I think the best brokers do that. They take that client for life philosophy and they say, right, actually, I have slowed it down, but I know I've got a client for life here. I know they're making a better decision. And it's actually like a snowball effect anyway. For those clients, they don't leave because they know they've got someone they can trust and they refer. So the brokers, once they get that, they know that's a much better decision as well.
All right. And what about the products themselves, the mortgages?
Yeah, so that introductory rates, real basic frills, no home loans, without any offset accounts, because offset accounts are an amazing tool to use when you're borrowing, no matter really what stage of the property journey you're at. On a positive, a green flag, it's really loans which are called package loans that have got discounts locked in for the life of the loan. That's really what you want, is to try to get a loan that's locked in with a big discount. Because if banks in the future reduce how much the discounts are, which they have done in the last 6 months, they've always been increasing the discounts for new customers, but in the last 6 months, I think they realised they went too far. And so now they're actually reducing discounts. So people who were getting loans 6 months ago are getting discounts bigger than clients are today. And if discounts don't go back up again, then they've locked in a deal that's probably going to be the best deal ever. And so I think that's the real thing you want to look for, is a discount locked in for the life loan versus an introductory rate. And an offset account is the two main things. The colour of the bank. And I would say just be careful going to non-banks. So you've got your Big Four, your INGs and your Macquarie's and things like that. But then you've got non-banks, and those non-banks haven't got the same funding line. So you just got to be careful. If you go to those banks, you just know that if things don't go very well for them, then your rates could jump up. So you need to be able, if you go there, you need to be able to jump back out, which is, the reason usually people go there is they can't get lending at other banks. And so it's a risky move unless you can refinance out.
I think we covered a lot. There's a lot of different things to think about when it comes to property, isn't there? Yeah,
and I think the last thing is probably on the property side. So, I think when you are out there looking, you've got to go, well, what are the green flags on this property? What are the good things about this actual property, and what are the things that are negative? And the good things will always stand out. It's got great light, it's a good street, it's got good privacy. And that's great, and they will drive its value up, because the more good things a property has, the better. But what you really want to do is I think property is like managing risk, right? So you think the less negatives this property's got, the less risk it's got, right? So you've got to go out and go, what will people not like about this property? And get into, and not just what you as a single or a couple, but what would other buyer pools not like? And think about all the different people. So you've got singles, you've got couples, you've got young families, you've got older families, you've got downsizers, you've got divorcees, you've got single families. There's lots of different buyer pools out there. And while you're not at those stages, you can sort of envisage what they would like and sort of go through those buyer pools and go, well, yeah, it really suits singles, but it doesn't suit couples because it's a studio, right? Okay, well, that wouldn't suit set families. It might not suit. So it maybe is really targeted just to singles, and that's not the greatest demographic in terms of borrowing. But, you could say this property is really good for young families. It's really good for older families because it's got multiple living zones. It's really good for downsizers because it's not lots of stairs and there's parking. And so, or it's not good for those buyer pools because it could be like, oh, it's on a busy road and families wouldn't like that. Or it's got privacy problems. Or it could be that it's got lots of stairs or, et cetera. So you've got to sort of look at the property, and ideally the compromises or the things that are not great about a property, you really want to minimize those.
Yeah.
And the best properties, or it could be it's dark because it's, south facing and it's another building giving it shadow, or it's got lots of issues with the building, or it's got, the neighbors are, not great, or et cetera. So, or it's got flight paths, or so. It's just when you're there, don't fall in love with the styling and the feel of it. You've got to start saying, what's wrong with this property? Because those things that other buyers will see, and those other buyers will be discounting it in the future. They won't go stretch their limit because they'll go, I love it, but there's some problem that they don't like, and they'll limit what they spend. Whereas the best properties, they'll just go, there's nothing wrong with this property. It ticks all my boxes. And then whatever the budget they've got, they'll just spend it all. And then they'll ask family, friends for money. And so you'll see there's a real gap between the properties that tick all the boxes versus not.
Yeah. So thinking a few steps ahead to who would you be selling it to, and what would they be thinking about the property? Yeah. And ideally the multiple buyer pools. So you love, and the pools you really want is kind of the higher income couples, the double income families, the older families is a dream scenario as well, because that's usually when people are at their peak earning cycle. And then if you could also get a property that suits downsizers, because they're the ones with cash, right? So it's people who are earning a lot of money, and as their earning goes up, they still want the property as in their, later in their careers. And then the downsizer market is ones who have got a lot of cash. So if you could get let's say an apartment, for example, in Sydney,
They could suit a young family, especially if it's a bit bigger, but could also suit a downsizer who's got a house in the area that doesn't want to leave. And so when they try to sell it in 5 years, 10 years time, the people at the auction is a young family who's desperate. They really want to get in the market. And then you've got this cashed up downsizer who's selling a house. He's got lots of cash and then they're competing on it. Whereas if the property didn't suit the downsizer, then it's just the young families competing. It's not as much competition.
Yeah. I feel like the summary of a lot of the things we've talked about in today's episode is just understanding like where the money is and what the incentives are when it comes to working with all these professionals or who you're selling it to or accessing different products.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I think that especially when you're dealing with real estate agents is they'll make you feel like you're their friend. They'll call you all the time. But yeah, absolutely remember that the vendor's paying for them. And with the buyer's agency, absolutely ask as many questions you are. Who's paying you? You really want to be the only one paying them. They're getting no kickbacks from anywhere else. Broking, they all get paid by the bank. So that's just the way it is. And no bank will really offer them more commission than the other. So it's not really that conflict there, but it's just more a case of, are they just really keen to sell the product rather than, stopping you? And so I would say that's probably the good way around the incentives.
Wonderful. Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining me on this episode.
It was awesome. Good chat. Lots to cover. And I think these are just compounding learnings. It's just trying to learn how to navigate all these different professionals. And so hopefully that was valuable to anyone listening.
Yeah, absolutely. And if people want to hear more from you, you're available every week on the Australian Property Podcast and you're answering questions there as well. So people can send them in via the form in the show notes.
Absolutely. Look forward to it.
All right. Thanks for joining us, Chris.
Cheers.